We're back now from Greenville, South Carolina, with the candidates for the Republican presidential nomination. Mr. Trump, I have a question for you. Presidents have to, on the one hand, be firm, but also be flexible. You've been flexible and changed your opinion on a number of things, from abortion to Hillary Clinton. But you've said, rightly, that it's just like Ronald Reagan, who changed his mind on things. But at the same time, you're criticizing Senator Cruz for what you say is a change on immigration. He disputes that, of course. So why is your change of opinion make you like Reagan, and when he changes his opinion, it's a huge character flaw?
John, in life, you have flexibility. You do have flexibility. When you're fighting wars, you're going one way, you have a plan. It's a beautiful plan. It can't lose. The enemy makes a change, and all of a sudden you have to change. You have to have flexibility. In Ronald Reagan, though, in terms of what we're talking about, was the great example. He was a somewhat liberal Democrat who became a somewhat pretty strong conservative. He became, most importantly, became a great president. He made many of the changes that I've made. I mean, I've seen, as I grew up, I've seen, and as I get older and wiser, and I feel that I am a conservative. Now, I also feel I'm a common sense conservative because some of the views I don't agree with. And I think a lot of people agree with me, obviously, based on what's happening.
Which conservative idea don't you agree with?
Well, I think these people always hit me with eminent domain. And frankly, I'm not in love with eminent domain, but eminent domain is something that you need very strongly. When Jeb had said you used eminent domain privately for a parking lot, it wasn't for a parking lot. The state of New Jersey, too bad Chris Christie's not here, he could tell you, the state of New Jersey wanted to build a very large tower that was going to employ thousands of people. I mean, it was going to really do a big job in terms of economic development. Now, just so you understand, I got hit very hard. It's private eminent domain. You understand that they took over a stadium in Texas and they used private eminent domain, but he just found that out after he made the charge.
All right. Governor Bush, I think by they, he's referring to your brother.
Yeah.
You're on the hook for your brother.
Well, Jeb wouldn't have known about it.
So there's all sorts of intrigue about where I disagree with my brother. There'd be one right there. You should not use eminent domain for private purposes, a baseball stadium or a parking lot for limos.
You shouldn't have used it then, Jeb.
It's very different. Transmission lines, pipelines, bridges, highways, all of that is proper use of eminent domain. Not to take an elderly woman's home to build a parking lot so that high rollers can come from New York City to failed casinos in Atlantic City. That is not the appropriate thing to do.
Senator Cruz, you were mentioned in the mix here. Your response?
You know, flexibility is a good thing, but you shouldn't be flexible on core principles. I like Donald. He is an amazing entertainer, but his policies for most of his life...
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
For most of his life, his policies have been very, very liberal. For most of his life, he has described himself as very pro-choice and as a supporter of partial birth abortion. Right now, today, as a candidate, he supports federal taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. I disagree with him on that. That's a matter of principle, and I'll tell you...
You are the single biggest liar. You probably are worse than Jeb Bush. You are the single biggest liar.
All right.
This guy lied. Let me just tell you, this guy lied about Ben Carson when he took votes away from Ben Carson in Iowa, and he just continues. And today, we had robocalls saying Donald Trump is not going to run in South Carolina, where I'm leading by a lot. I'm not going to run. Vote for Ted Cruz. This is the same thing he did to Ben Carson. This guy will say anything. Nasty guy. Now I know why he doesn't have one endorsement from any of his colleagues.
All right, John, I get to
Senator Cruz,
respond.
pick from the buffet there.
He's a nasty guy.
Well, I will say... I will say it is fairly remarkable to see Donald defending Ben after he called him pathological and compared him to a child molester, both of which were offensive and wrong. But let me say more broadly, you notice Donald didn't disagree with the substance, that he supports taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. And Donald has this weird pattern. When you point to his own record, he screams, liar, liar, liar. If you want to go...
Where did I support it? Where did I support it? Hey, Ted, where did I support it?
If you want to go and watch the video, go to our website, tedcruz.org.
Where did I support it, Ted?
Out of Donald's own mouth When we
Where
were
did I support it?
You supported it when we were battling over defunding Planned Parenthood. You went on
That's
television
a lot
and
of
said
nonsense.
Planned Parenthood does wonderful things and we should not defund
Oh,
them.
it does do wonderful
And-
things,
and-
but not as it relates to abortion.
So tell
They
me, what
do
are the
some-
wonderful
excuse
things?
me,
What are the wonderful
excuse
things it
me.
does?
There are wonderful things having to do with women's health.
You see,
but
you and I
not when it
disagree on
comes
that.
to abortion.
That's and
not
John,
when it comes
the
to
reason
abortion.
principle matters.
That's where I draw the
John,
line.
the reason principle matters. The reason principle matters, sadly, was illustrated by the first questions today. The next president is going to appoint 1, 2, 3, 4 Supreme Court justices. If Donald Trump is president, he will appoint liberals. If Donald Trump is president, your Second Amendment will go away.
Hold on,
And
before.
you know
Let
how
me
I
tell
know
you.
that?
Hold on, gentlemen.
Ted
I'm going to
Cruz
turn this
wanted
car around.
John Roberts, Ted Cruz, with your brother, wanted John Roberts to be in the United States Supreme Court. They both pushed him. He twice approved Obamacare.
All right, gentlemen.
Good going, man.
My name was
Hold on. We're
my name was mentioned twice.
Well, hold on. We're going to, gentlemen, we're in danger of driving this into the dirt.
You gave us
Senator
Obamacare.
Rubio, I'd like you to, you want to jump in
called
here?
me a liar.
I understand.
Say something.
You're on deck,
He
Governor.
also
You're on
denigrated
And he also
one
made
of my
an
heroes,
allegation
Ronald
about
Reagan.
me.
Ronald Reagan was a liberal maybe in the 1950s. He was a conservative reform governor for 8 years before he became president, and no one would suggest he made an evolution for political purposes. He was a conservative, and he didn't tear down people like Donald Trump did. He tore down the Berlin Wall.
Okay, Governor.
And he was a great guy.
Governor, Senator Cruz, 30 seconds on this one.
I did not nominate John Roberts. I would not have nominated
You
John
pushed
Roberts.
him. You
I
pushed him.
supported
You
him
worked
once
with
he
him
was
and you
appointed.
pushed him. Why do you lie?
Donald,
Why do you
adults
lie?
learn not to interrupt each other.
Why do you lie?
Donald learned.
You pushed him.
Donald, adults learn not to interrupt each other.
Yeah, I know. You're an adult. You're an adult.
I did not nominate him. I would not have nominated him. I would have nominated my former boss, Mike Ludig, who was Justice Scalia's first law clerk. And you know how I know that Donald's Supreme Court justices will be liberals? Because his entire life he supported liberals, from Jimmy Carter to Hillary Clinton to John Kerry. In 2004, he contributed to John Kerry. Nobody who cares about judges would contribute to John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Chuck Schumer, and Harry Reid.
We're going to switch.
That's what Donald Trump.
Governor, we're going to switch gears here. Senator Marco Rubio. Senator Marco Rubio, please weigh in.
On anything I want?
Oh, I thought you had a-
Good.
I thought
Well, let
you
me
had
talk
a-
about poverty.
I thought you had a point
No,
you want to make.
I do. You mentioned
that was
poverty
me.
earlier, and that's something that's
I,
important.
I think that was me that had a
You're on the on-deck circle, sir.
You know, the issue of poverty is critical because for me, poverty is free enterprise not reaching people. Today, we have anti-poverty programs that don't cure poverty. We don't cure poverty in America. Our anti-poverty programs have become, in some instances, a way of life, a lifestyle. Now, we do need anti-poverty programs. You can't have free enterprise without them, but not as a way of life. And so I have a very specific proposal on this, and in 60 seconds I can't describe it all, but it basically turns the program over to states. It allows states to design innovative programs that cure poverty, because I think Nikki Haley will do a better job curing poverty than Barack Obama.
Senator, I wanted to ask you, just going back to immigration, in the last debate you listed your series of accomplishments in the Senate. One thing you left off was immigration reform. Is it the case that in your list of accomplishments you can't mention that?
Well, no, it's not the case. It didn't pass, and we haven't solved immigration in this country. It's still a problem. It is worse today than it was 3 years ago, which is worse than it was 5 years ago, and it has to be confronted and solved. But the only way forward on this issue, you asked a question about flexibility. Let me tell you about that. One of the things that you need in leadership is the ability to understand that to get things done, you must figure out the way to get it done. You will not pass comprehensive immigration reform. People do not trust the federal government. They want to see the law being enforced. They want to see illegal immigration come under control. They want to see that wall. They want to see E-Verify. They want to see all of these things working. And then they will have a conversation with you about what do you do with people that have been here a long time that are otherwise, not criminals. But they're not going to do it until you first enforce the law.
Dr. Carson, I have a question for you. Candidates are...
Before you ask the question, can I respond to they mentioned my name a couple of times.
All right, you have 30 seconds, Doctor.
All right. Well, first of all, so many people have said to me, you need to scream and jump up and down like everybody else. Is that really what you want, what we just saw? I don't think so. And, when I got into this race, I decided to look under the hood of the engine of what runs Washington, D.C., and my first inclination was to run away. But I didn't do it because I'm thinking about our children and the fact that we are the United States of America, and anybody up here is going to be much better than what's going to come on the other side. And what happened tonight with Justice Scalia tells you that we cannot afford to lose this election, and we cannot be tearing each other down.
Dr. Carson, let me ask you a different question. When you were the first one really to talk about political correctness. Everybody now talks about it, but that was really what sparked your rise. Politicians are often accused of glossing over any hard choices people have to make, just always selling happy, nice things. So in the spirit of saying something that might be politically incorrect, tell the voter something that they need to hear but that might be politically incorrect.
Well, first of all, I'm not a politician, so I'm never going to become a politician. But here's what people need to know. People need to know that free college is a non-starter. You know, you have to look at our economic situation. We're on the verge of economic collapse. And, you know, it's not just the $19 trillion, but it's also the $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And what we need to think about is, what does that do to the average person? When we have a debt of that nature, it causes the Fed to change their policy. It causes the central bank to keep the rates low. And who does that affect? Mr. Average, who used to go to the bank every Friday and put part of his check in the bank and watch it grow over 3 decades and be able to retire with a nice nest egg. That's gone. That part of the American dream is gone. All of these things are disappearing. And Bernie Sanders and people like Hillary Clinton blame it on the rich. They say those evil rich people, if we take their money, we can solve the problem. It's not the evil rich people. It's the irresponsible evil government.
All right, Governor Kasich. Governor Kasich, you've been described as the Democrats' favorite Republican. You talked about in New Hampshire, Democrats would come up to you and say, I hope you win. Why will that help you win a Republican nomination?
You know, John, I think all people are the same. Look, I did 106 town halls, and I've been doing them left and right here in South Carolina. Look, the first thing we have to do is grow the economy. And I know the formula because I was chairman in Washington when we balanced the budget and created so many jobs, and the same that we've been able to do in Ohio. You need common sense regulations so small business can flourish. You need lower taxes both on businesses and individuals, and you need a fiscal plan to be able to get ourselves in a situation where people can predict a little bit about the future when it comes to the fiscal issues. And when you have that formula, combined with workforce that's trained, you can explode the economy and create many jobs. I've done it twice, and I want to go back to Washington and do it again. John, the thing is that I think that there are people now, these blue-collar Democrats. My dad was a blue-collar Democrat. The Democratic Party's left them. When they're arguing about being socialists, they've lost those blue-collar Democrats. And you know what I think they get out of me? Is my sense of what they get out of me, and it's embarrassment about campaigns. You brag about yourself. But I think I'm a uniter. I think people sense it. I think they know I have the experience, and that I'm a man that can give people hope and the sense that they have an opportunity to rise. And I tell you, I love these blue-collar Democrats because they're going to vote for us come next fall. Promise you that.
Mr. Trump, let me ask you a question. Presidents in both parties say that the one thing you need in your administration is somebody who can tell you you're wrong. You don't necessarily seem like somebody who tells you you're wrong a lot. Can you tell us of an instance where somebody said, Donald Trump, you're wrong, and you listened to them?
Well, I would say my wife tells me I'm wrong all the time, and I listen.
About what?
Oh, let me just say, look, I am very open. I hired top people. I've had great success. I built a great company. I don't need to do this. I'm self-funding. I'm spending a lot of money. I've spent, like in New Hampshire, I spent $3 million. Jeb Bush spent $44 million. He came in 5, and I came in number 1. That's what the country needs, folks. I spent 3. He spends 42 of their money, of special interest money. And it's just, this is not going to make, this is not going to make our country great again. This is not what we need in our country. We need people that know what the hell they're doing. And politicians, they're all talk, There's no action, and that's why people are supporting me. I do listen to people. I hire experts. I hire top people, and I do listen. And you know what? Sometimes they're wrong. You have to know what to do, when to do it. But sometimes they're wrong.
Something in talking to voters that they wish somebody would tell you to cut it out is the profanity. What's your reaction to that?
I'll tell you. Over the years, I've made many speeches. People have asked me, big companies have asked me to make speeches, and friends of mine that run big companies on success. And on occasion, in order to sort of really highlight something, I use a profanity. One of the profanities that I got credited with using that I didn't use was a very bad word 2 weeks ago that I never used. I said, you. And everybody said, oh, he didn't say anything wrong. But you bleeped it. So everyone thinks I said the word. I didn't say anything. I never said the word. It is very unfair, that criticism. Now, I will say this. With all of that being said, I have said I will not do it at all. Because if I say a word that's a little bit off color, a little bit, it ends up being a headline. I will not do it again. I was a very good student at a great school. Not using, by the way, not using profanity is very easy.
All right. Okay, Governor Bush, I'd like to ask
I got to respond to this.
Well, how about you respond, and then you can answer the question I'm about to ask.
Sounds like a good plan.
It'll be
or you could ask me 2 questions so I could get 2 minutes instead of 1.
If we adjudicate this, the night will be over. Governor, in 2012, you said that your father and Ronald Reagan would have a hard time in today's Republican Party based on their records of trying to find accommodation and finding some degree of common ground. Do you still feel that way?
I think that the dysfunction in Washington is really dangerous. That's what I think. And we need a proven leader that has a record of solving problems. Someone who doesn't cut and run. Someone who could be a commander-in-chief to unite our country around common purposes. Someone who doesn't disparage people. Someone that doesn't brag, for example, that he's been bankrupt 4 times and it was great because he could use the legal system.
Let me respond. That's another lie. I never went bankrupt.
Hold on, Mr. Trump.
It's another lie.
But hold on.
No, but it's a lie. This guy, he doesn't know what
campaign.
he's talking about.
We need someone with a
Just a
proven
lie.
record to be able to forge consensus to solve problems. And right now, both Republicans and Democrats in Washington don't get it. People are struggling. 63% of Americans can't make a $500 car payment. Most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And we need someone who has a proven record of growing the economy, reforming the things that are broken, and I'm that person.
Okay, Mr. Trump, your response.
Let me just tell you. Jeb goes around saying, just like the biggest business leaders in this country, I've used the laws of the land to I bought a company, I threw it immediately into a chapter, I made a great deal. I used the laws to my benefit because I run a company.
Yeah,
I never went bankrupt. Excuse me, Jeb.
Yeah.
I never went bankrupt. Never. Now, but you don't want to say that. Now, let me just say, I've used it just like the biggest leaders in the country. Let me just tell you something. Florida, he put so much debt on Florida. You know, we keep saying he's a wonderful governor, wonderful governor. He put so much debt on Florida, and he increased spending so much that as soon as he got out of office, Florida crashed. I happened to be there. It's my second home. Florida crashed.
Okay.
He didn't do a good job as governor. And you haven't, excuse me, you haven't heard that. You listened to the good record in Florida. You take a look at what happened. As soon as that year ended, he got out, Florida crashed. Too much debt. He loaded it up with debt. And his spending went through the roof.
Mr. Trump, please, the bells are ringing,
this was
sir.
not a good governor.
Here's the record. Here's the record. We led the nation in job growth 7 out of 8 years. When I left, there was $9 billion of reserves, 35% of general revenue. No state came close to that.
Numbers.
During my time, we were one of 2 states to go to AAA bond rating. We didn't go bankrupt like Trump did and call it success when people are laid off, when vendors don't get paid. That's not success. What we did was create an environment where people had a chance to have income. Personal income during my time went up by 4.4%.
Florida went down the tubes right after he got out of office. The
government grew by half of
what
that.
he did to
All right. Thank you. Senator Rubio, I want to ask you a 30-second question. No president
30
can...
seconds.
No, well, I'll ask the question and you do what you want.
I'll speak fast.
No president can know everything, right? So a smart leader knows how to ask questions. So if you could talk to any previous president, what's the smart question you would ask about that job that you'd want to know?
Well, I think one of the presidents, the president I grew up under was Ronald Reagan. And Reagan had a vision for America's future. And if you think about what Ronald Reagan inherited, it's not unlike what the next president is going to inherit. This is the worst president we've had in 35 years. 35 years back would have made it Jimmy Carter. That's what Ronald Reagan inherited. And I think the question you would ask is, how did you inspire, again, the American people to believe in the future? What did it take to ensure that the American people, despite all of the difficulties of the time, you know, you look back at that time, the American military was in decline, our standing in the world was in decline, we had hostages being held in Iran, our economy was in bad shape. The American people were scared about the future. They were scared about what kind of country their children were going to live in and inherit. And yet somehow Ronald Reagan was able to instill in our nation and in our people a sense of optimism, and he turned America around because of that vision and ultimately because of that leadership. I wish Ronald Reagan was still around. This country needs someone just like that. And if our next president is even half the president Ronald Reagan was, America is going to be greater than it's ever been.
All right, that's going to have to be it there. Senator Rubio, we've got to go to a break. We'll be right back with the CBS News Republican debate in Greenville.